Welcome to my channel. Family should be where the storm stops at the door. But what if that very place is the source of all pain and injustice? Will you choose silence or stand up? Here I tell you the hidden truths of favoritism and the scars that daughters are forced to endure. But don't leave just yet, because this is only the beginning. Stay tuned to see how I'll make them regret it, and exactly how high a price they'll pay for their cruelty. Stay with me until the very end of this story to see justice served. If you believe the truth must be revealed, hit like and subscribe to stand with me right now.
This is a story about my family, the Ashfords. A name that means something in Boston. Old money, political power, the kind of dynasty that gets buildings named after it. My grandfather, Alfred Ashford, built an empire from nothing. 78 years of life, 50 of them spent turning Ashford Industries into one of the most respected manufacturing companies on the East Coast. He was the kind of man who believed in handshake deals and keeping your word, even when it cost you. His son, my father, Marco, learned different lessons. At 52, he'd transformed himself from a businessman into a politician. State senator with his eyes on the governor's mansion. He'd mastered the art of the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the promise that sounds sincere but means nothing. My mother, Natalia, 48 and elegant as a blade, ran the Ashford Foundation. Charity work, fundraising galas, photo opportunities with underprivileged children. She made compassion look expensive. And then there was me,
This
Lucia
is a
Ashford,
test recording to
23
demonstrate
years old,
professional
final year
vocal
medical
delivery.
student at Harvard, trying desperately to believe I came from good people. Our story intersects with another family, the Riveras. Diego had been our gardener for 20 years, a quiet Mexican immigrant who made the roses bloom even in Boston's harsh winters. His son Enzo was my age, and we'd grown up playing hide-and-seek in the hedge maze while our fathers discussed very different kinds of futures. There are others who mattered to this story too. Elliot Whitmore, my grandfather's closest friend, who ran First Continental Bank with the discretion of a priest hearing confession. Detective Sarah Chen, a federal investigator who would eventually untangle everything. Dr. James Mitchell, the transplant surgeon whose skills would save one life while exposing the lies surrounding another. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story begins and ends at the Ashford Estate in Beacon Hill, Boston. A mansion that looked like something from a storybook, but housed secrets that would make your skin crawl. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. The first time I understood what betrayal truly meant, I was sitting in a rusted Mercedes SUV covered in 5 years of dust, holding a voice recorder that should have been lost forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a Christmas Eve that looked perfect from the outside, but was rotting from within. Snow was falling thick and heavy over
My name is
Boston
Renata
that night.
Martinez, and this is the story of how
The
I
kind
learned
of
that sometimes
snow
the
that
people
makes
who gave you life
everything
are the
look
same
pure
ones
and
who try to
innocent,
erase it.
even when it's anything but. The Ashford Estate was lit up like a palace, every window glowing warm against the winter darkness. I was 18 then, young, naive, still believed in happy endings. Inside the ballroom, champagne flowed freely. String quartets played Vivaldi. Women in designer gowns laughed at jokes that weren't funny. And men in $1,000 suits made promises they'd never keep. This was my world. The world of Boston's elite, where appearances mattered more than truth. My father stood at the center of it all, shaking hands and flashing that practiced smile he'd perfected over 30 years in politics. Marco Ashford, state senator, the golden boy of Massachusetts politics. He was planning to announce his run for governor in the new year, and tonight's party was really about building support, making connections, securing those crucial early endorsements. My mother, Natalia, moved through the crowd like a queen, her diamond necklace catching the light with every turn of her head. She ran the Ashford Foundation, our family's charitable organization. On paper, it donated millions to worthy causes. In reality, well, that's another story. I stood by the window watching the snow, feeling out of place in my own home. I'd just graduated high school with a full scholarship to Harvard Medical School. Everyone kept congratulating me, telling me how proud my parents must be. But when I looked in their eyes, I saw something else. Calculation. Like I was another chess piece in their game. "Lucia, darling." My mother appeared at my elbow, pressing a champagne flute into my hand. "You look so serious. It's Christmas. Smile." I looked at the glass. The bubbles rose slowly, catching the light. "Mom, I don't really drink. You're 18 now, an adult. One glass won't hurt." Her smile was warm, but her eyes were cold. "Besides, we have a long drive home,
And this is stories of
and
how
you'll
I'm
want to
lies
sleep in the car.
sometimes the people who
Big
gave
day
you life
tomorrow.
are the to
Lots
train
of
you
family
erase it
coming
and
over.
forgive.
I should have known better, but I was young, and I wanted so badly to please them, to fit into the life they'd built. So I drank it. The champagne tasted slightly bitter, but I thought that was normal. I'd never had alcohol before. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the bitter taste wasn't from the wine. You see, my parents needed me unconscious that night. Not because of what had happened, but because of what they were about to do. They needed time to talk freely in the car, to finalize plans they couldn't risk anyone overhearing. Plans for election fraud. My father's campaign was in trouble. His main opponent had gained momentum, and internal polls showed him losing by double digits. He needed an edge, and he'd found one. A scheme to manipulate voter registrations in key districts, to funnel illegal donations through shell companies, to buy influence in ways that could destroy him if exposed. They needed privacy to discuss these details, and they couldn't have that with me awake in the back seat. So my mother had crushed 2 tablets of Ambien into my champagne, just enough to knock me out for a few hours. Just enough to ensure their secrets stayed secret. I remember the party getting fuzzy around the edges. The music seemed to come from far away. My mother's hand was on my elbow, guiding me toward the door. "Come on, darling. Time to go home." The last thing I remember clearly was settling into the back seat of our black Mercedes GLS. The leather was cool against my cheek. My mother placed something in my lap. My voice recorder. That little Sony device I used for studying, for recording lectures, for practicing my English pronunciation. "Don't forget this," she said softly. "You left it in the study." And then, darkness. I don't remember the drive, but the voice recorder does. It was on. I must have accidentally pressed the record button when my mother handed it to me. Or maybe it was already recording from earlier. Either way, that little device captured everything. The first 40 minutes are just road noise, the hum of tires on wet pavement, the occasional sound of my father and mother talking in the front seat, their voices low and confident. Then, at 11:43 p.m., everything changed. There was a sound, a terrible, sickening thud. The screech of brakes, the jolt of sudden impact, and screaming. But I wasn't there for any of it. The drugs had pulled me under completely. While my parents' lives were exploding in the front seat, I was lost in dreamless sleep in the back. "Oh God!" My mother's voice, high and panicked. "Marco, what did you... There's someone... Oh God! Oh God! Shut up! Let me think!" My father, harsh and commanding even in crisis. The sound of car doors opening. Footsteps on wet pavement. Then my mother's voice again, further away now, breaking. Marco, she's not moving. I think she's dead." A long silence. When my father spoke again, his voice was different. Calculated. Cold. Get back in the car. We need to call Diego. Call. Diego, the gardener? Why would we? Because he's going to take the fall for this. His son is dying, Natalia. End-stage renal failure. Needs a transplant that costs $500,000. Money that a gardener could never have. You're going to offer to pay for the surgery in exchange for him confessing? Something like that. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. But will you actually pay? A laugh, short and bitter. Of course not. I'll let him think I will. But that money is going into the campaign. We're behind in the polls, remember? We need every dollar we can get. Once he's in prison and his son dies from lack of treatment, there won't be any witnesses left to contradict our story. There was a long pause. Then my mother spoke, her voice small. What about Lucia? What about her? If she wakes up, if she remembers, she won't remember. You gave her enough to knock out a horse. And even if she asks questions, I'll tell her we're paying for the boy's surgery. You know our daughter, Natalia. She's the most compassionate person we've ever met. Her kindness is her weakness. She'll keep quiet because she'll think she's saving a life. Another pause, then my mother's voice. Steadier now.
My name is Renata Martinez,
right.
and this is the story of how I learned
She's
that sometimes
always
the
been
people who
so
gave you life are the same ones
soft.
who try to erase it.
So easy to manipulate. That's my girl. Now let's go make a deal with Diego. The recording continues for another hour. The sound of them driving back to the estate. The garage door opening. My father making phone calls. And then, around 2:15 a.m., the conversation that would damn them both. They were sitting in the car, my father and mother in the front seats, me still unconscious in the back. Diego must have been standing outside the vehicle, because I could hear my father's voice clearly through the closed windows. It's done. Diego has signed the confession. Now we just call the police, they pick him up with that old pickup truck of his, and this whole mess goes away. But what about her condition? The woman who... dead. Hispanic, probably undocumented based on her clothes. No ID on her. They'll run her fingerprints, but by the time anyone comes asking questions, the case will be closed. Diego will be in prison, and we'll be planning a victory party for the governor's mansion. And Lucia? Still knocked out like a baby. She'll wake up tomorrow morning with a headache and no memory of tonight. I'll tell her about Diego's confession over breakfast. I'll play the sympathetic father, offering to help with the medical bills for Diego's son. She'll beg me to keep it quiet so the money doesn't get tied up in legal proceedings. And just like that, we'll have her complicit in the cover-up. You really think she'll... I don't think, Natalia. I know. Our daughter's greatest virtue is her compassion. And compassion, my dear, is the easiest thing in the world to weaponize. The recording continues. The sound of them getting out of the car. Footsteps fading away. A door closing. And then, silence. Just the faint hum of the voice recorder, faithfully capturing nothing at all. What my parents didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that when the car hit Maria Santos at 11:43 p.m., the force of the impact had sent my voice recorder flying from my lap. It had shot forward through the gap between the front seats, tumbling down into the darkness beneath the driver's seat. There it had lodged, wedged tight against the metal frame of the seat track, where it would remain hidden for the next 5 years, recording everything, waiting. I woke up with a splitting headache and a mouth that tasted like cotton. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom windows, far too bright. My phone said it was 10:37 a.m. I'd slept through breakfast. I stumbled downstairs, still in the dress from last night's party, my hair a mess. In the kitchen, my parents were watching the morning news on the small TV by the coffee maker. Tragic accident on Beacon Street last night. Police have arrested Diego Rivera, 50, a local gardener, on charges of vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated. The victim has been identified as Maria Santos, 45, an immigrant worker. My blood ran cold. Diego? Our Diego? The kind man who'd taught me about roses when I was 7? "Oh, you're up," my mother said, too brightly. She clicked off the TV. "How are you feeling, darling?" "My head. What happened?" "I don't remember getting home." "You had a bit too much champagne," my father said, not looking up from his newspaper. "We carried you to bed. You were out like a light." I sat down heavily in a chair. "Diego, the news said—" My father folded his newspaper and looked at me for the first time. His eyes were serious, his voice measured. This was his courtroom voice, the one he used when he wanted to sound concerned but authoritative. "Lucia, there's something you should know. Diego's son, Enzo. You remember him? You two used to play together when you were children. He's very ill. End-stage kidney failure. He needs a transplant urgently." "Oh my God." "The surgery cost nearly $500,000. Diego has been desperate. Last night he made a terrible mistake. He'd been drinking, not at our party, somewhere else, and he got behind the wheel of his truck. There was an accident. A woman died." I felt sick. This couldn't be real. My father continued. "Diego has confessed. He's going to prison. But here's what I want to tell you, and this needs to stay between us." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "I'm going to pay for Enzo's surgery. All of it. Every penny." I looked up at him, shocked. You are?" "Yes. Diego has worked for our family for 20 years. He made a horrible mistake, but his son shouldn't have to die because of it. However," he paused, "if the media finds out, they'll say I'm trying to buy Diego's silence. They'll investigate the accident more thoroughly. There could be delays, legal complications. The money could get frozen in escrow. And Enzo doesn't have time for delays. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I understood. "You want me to keep quiet about the money. I need you to keep quiet. Not for me. For Enzo. If you love that boy like a brother, and I know you do, then you won't say a word to anyone. Not your friends, not the police, nobody. Can you do that, Lucia? What would you have done?" I was 18. I'd known Enzo since I was 6 years old. The thought of him dying because of some legal technicality, because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. "I won't tell anyone," I whispered. "I promise." My father smiled and patted my hand. "That's my good girl. You're doing the right thing. You're saving a life." But I wasn't. I wasn't saving anyone. Because the money never came. Not a single dollar. Diego went to prison 2 weeks later. Enzo waited for the surgery that never happened. And I kept my promise of silence, believing every day that I was keeping Enzo alive. I wouldn't learn the truth for 5 more years. A miracle happened. An anonymous charitable foundation, something called the Evergreen Foundation, paid for Enzo's transplant. The full $500,000 transferred overnight. No one knew where it came from or who had funded it. Enzo got his surgery. He survived. I was so relieved I cried. I thought maybe my father had found a way to channel the money secretly, to avoid the media attention. It never occurred to me to question it more deeply. Diego heard the news in prison. He was serving a 15-year sentence for vehicular manslaughter. When his lawyer told him his son would live, he broke down sobbing in the visiting room. But there was something else in his eyes, too, something I would only understand much later. Confusion. Because Diego knew the truth. He knew the deal he'd made with Marco Ashford, and he knew that Marco had never intended to keep his end of the bargain. So where had the money come from? The answer was in an old man's study, being written into a legal document that wouldn't be executed for another year. My grandfather, Alfred Ashford, was dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months at most. I visited him every day in the small cottage he'd built for himself on the edge of the estate grounds. While my parents lived in the main mansion with its ballrooms and marble floors, Alfred had chosen a simple 2-bedroom house with a garden and a view of the woods. "Money doesn't make you happy, Lucia," he told me once, his voice thin and papery. "It just makes you visible. And visibility attracts the worst kind of people." I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought he was just being philosophical, the way old people sometimes are when they know their time is running out. What I didn't know was that Alfred had been conducting his own investigation. He'd been suspicious from the start. Diego had worked for the family for 2 decades. He was meticulous, careful, never took a single day off sick. And he never drank alcohol, not even a beer on the 4th of July. So when Diego suddenly confessed to drunk driving, Alfred knew something was wrong. He visited Diego in prison, spoke to him privately, away from lawyers and officials. And slowly, painfully, Diego told him the truth. The accident wasn't his. The confession was bought with a promise that was never kept. And Marco Ashford had let Diego's son nearly die rather than spend a penny he'd earmarked for his political campaign. Alfred went home that night and sat in his study for a long time. He was old. He was sick. And his son controlled everything now. The company, the money, the political connections. If Alfred tried to expose Marco publicly, his son would have the resources and the ruthlessness to destroy any evidence and silence any witnesses, including, potentially, Lucia. So Alfred decided on a different path, a longer path, one that would take years to unfold, but would be unassailable when it finally came to light. He called his oldest friend, Elliot Whitmore, who ran First Continental Bank. "Elliot," he said, his voice shaking with illness and rage, "I need your help with something. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to trust me." Over the next 3 weeks, Alfred set up a complex trust fund, $60 million, carefully hidden from Marco's oversight, locked behind conditions that seemed bizarre on the surface, but were actually carefully designed steps in a scavenger hunt. A hunt that would lead me back through our family's darkest secrets. He also did something else, something he told no one about, not even Elliot. He bought the Mercedes SUV. Marco had already sent it to his private auto body shop, Precision Auto Repair, a business he owned through a shell company. The mechanics had done their work quickly and quietly, repairing the damage, cleaning the blood off the headlights, making the car look brand new again. They thought they'd erased all evidence, but they'd missed something. Deep in the undercarriage, in a crevice where cleaning fluid couldn't reach, a few droplets of Maria Santos's blood had dried and hardened. Alfred paid them $80,000, far more than the car was worth, with one condition. They were never to touch it again, never to speak of the transaction, and they were to release it to his dummy company immediately. Then he did something that seemed insane. He drove the car to Port of Boston Container Storage and locked it in a shipping container. He paid for 1 year of storage, and then he deliberately didn't renew the contract. The storage facility sent him notices. First polite reminders, then stern warnings, then finally legal notices that the container would be sealed for unpaid fees. That was exactly what Alfred wanted. Under Massachusetts law, property sealed for unpaid storage fees couldn't be touched without specific legal proceedings. It couldn't be sold, couldn't be destroyed, couldn't be moved. It would sit in legal limbo, officially owned by whoever paid the back fees, but untouchable until then. It was the perfect way to preserve evidence, hidden in plain sight, protected by bureaucracy rather than conspiracy. Marco would never think to look for it there. Why would he? As far as Marco knew, the car had been sold to a dealership out of state. It was gone, forgotten, irrelevant. But it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Just like the voice recorder still wedged beneath its driver's seat. Battery slowly dying, but data intact. Waiting for the day someone would redeem it. Alfred Ashford died peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday morning. I was the one who found him. I'd come by to bring him breakfast, like I did every morning. He was lying in bed, his face peaceful, his hands folded on his chest. On the nightstand was a small wooden box with my name carved into the lid. Inside, I found 3 things. A black card with no name, just a single phone number on the back. A piece of paper with a handwritten note. Don't buy anything new. Redeem what we have lost. And a letter. My dearest Lucia, it began. If you're reading this, I am gone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to help you through what's coming, but I've left you the tools you'll need. Trust the process, even when it seems strange. Follow the breadcrumbs, and remember, the truth is always worth more than comfort. I love you. Grandfather. I didn't understand. Redeem what we have lost? What did that mean? I put the box away in my closet and tried to forget about it. I had medical school to focus on. I had a future to build. But the box stayed with me, in the back of my mind, like a splinter I couldn't quite remove. For 5 years, I carried on with my life. I excelled at Harvard Medical School. I worked in hospitals, learning to save lives. I dated, made friends, built a career. But I also carried a secret. The knowledge that Diego Rivera was in prison for something I wasn't sure he'd actually done. The belief that my father was somehow paying for Enzo's care, even though I never saw any evidence of it. And occasionally, late at night, I'd have strange dreams. Dreams of sitting in a car. Dreams of the sound of impact, of screaming, of voices talking while I floated in darkness. I'd wake up with my heart racing, not knowing why. The truth was buried. But like all buried things, it was waiting to be dug up. All it needed was the right shovel. That shovel came 5 years later, in the form of a young man standing at my door with his father's last letter and questions I couldn't answer. But that's where things really begin to unravel. 5 years is a long time to live with a lie. I spent those years becoming someone else. Harvard Medical School will do that to you. Strip away the naive girl and replace her with someone who understands that the human body is just a collection of systems that can fail. That death isn't poetic, and that sometimes you have to cut into people to save them. But I never quite shook the feeling that something was wrong. Diego's confession had always felt off, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong space. And my father's promise to pay for Enzo's surgery. I'd never seen any evidence of it, yet Enzo had survived. The Evergreen Foundation, they'd said. Some anonymous donor. I'd wanted to believe it was my father working through channels I didn't understand. I'd wanted to believe I'd kept my silence for a good reason. But wanting to believe something doesn't make it true. The truth came knocking on my door on a cold December evening. Exactly 5 years after that Christmas Eve I couldn't remember. Enzo Rivera stood in the hallway of my apartment near the medical school. I barely recognized him. The boy I'd known had been gangly and shy. This man was lean and hard, with eyes that had seen too much. "Lucia," he said quietly. "We need to talk." I invited him in, made coffee. We sat across from each other at my small kitchen table, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Enzo pulled out a folded piece of paper. "My father died last month, in prison, heart attack." My chest tightened. "Enzo, I'm so sorry." He left me a letter, hidden in a Bible. Took me weeks to find it. He unfolded the paper with shaking hands. "Do you want to know what it said?" I nodded, unable to speak. Enzo's voice cracked as he read. "Son, I am not a killer. I confessed to save you. They promised money for your surgery. The money never came. Someone else saved you, but I don't know who. Find Lucia Ashford. She is the key. She was there that night. Tell her I'm sorry for the lie we both believed." The room tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying your father never paid for my surgery, Lucia. I checked the hospital records. The Evergreen Foundation paid $500,000 from an anonymous donor. No connection to your family at all. He slid another paper across the table. A financial statement from Massachusetts General Hospital. Every payment detailed. Not a single dollar from Marco Ashford. For 5 years, Enzo continued, his voice hard now. I thought your family saved my life. I thought my father killed someone drunk driving, and your parents were good people who helped despite everything. But my father wasn't drunk. He wasn't driving, and your parents... He stopped, jaw clenched. Your parents let him die in prison for something he didn't do. I stared at the papers, my hands shaking. But my father said... He told me he was paying. That I had to keep quiet so the money wouldn't get tied up in legal issues. He lied to you, Lucia. He lied to both of us. The walls were closing in. 5 years. 5 years I'd kept silent because I thought I was saving Enzo's life. 5 years my father had used my compassion as a weapon. I confronted them, I said suddenly. I have to confront them. Enzo grabbed my wrist. Wait, think about this. Your father is about to announce his run for governor. He has power, connections, money. If you accuse him without proof, then I'll get proof. But I had no idea where to start. What I did know was that everything I'd believed for 5 years was a lie.
And this is
And if
stories
my
of how I
father had
lies
lied about the money,
sometimes the people who
what
gave
else
you
had he
life are
lied
the
about?
students who train you to erase it and forgive it.
History has a cruel sense of humor. 5 years to the day after that first Christmas Eve, I found myself back at the estate for another holiday party. But this time, I wasn't the naive girl who'd accept a drugged glass of champagne. This time, I had questions. The party was even more elaborate than before. My father's announcement was scheduled for January, and tonight was meant to secure final support from Boston's elite. Senators, judges, business moguls, anyone who mattered was here. I found my parents holding court in the study, surrounded by admirers. I waited until there was a lull, then stepped forward. Father, Mother, I need to speak with you, privately. Something flickered in my father's eyes. Irritation? Concern? He smiled at his guests. Excuse us for a moment. We moved to his private office. The moment the door closed, I placed the hospital records on his desk. Evergreen Foundation, I said quietly. Not you. You never paid a single dollar for Enzo's surgery. My mother's face went pale. My father's expression didn't change at all. I see, he said calmly. And what exactly do you think that means? It means you lied to me. You used my silence to cover up something, and I want to know what. Careful, Lucia. His voice was ice. You're making accusations you can't support. Diego Rivera died in prison last month. An innocent man, by his own account. And you? An innocent man? My father laughed, but there was no humor in it. He confessed, Lucia. Signed paperwork. Went to trial. Was convicted. That's how justice works. That's how you bought justice, you mean? The slap came so fast I barely saw it. My mother's hand cracked across my face, leaving my cheek burning. How dare you? She hissed. After everything we've given you. Harvard, this house, your entire life. And you stand there accusing your own father of what exactly? Murder? I touched my stinging cheek, something hardening inside me. If that's what it takes to get the truth. My father stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. You want the truth? Here it is. Everything you have came from me. Your education, your apartment, your credit cards. Your entire existence is funded by my money, built on my name. And you think you can threaten me? He picked up his phone. Johnson, yes, freeze all of Lucia's accounts, immediately. Credit cards, bank accounts, everything. And draft a statement for the press. What are you doing? I whispered. Protecting this family from a disturbed young woman. He looked at me with something like pity. You've been under a lot of stress, Lucia. Medical school, the pressure of being in Ashford. We're very concerned about your mental health. We've decided you need treatment. You can't do this. I already have. Get out of my house. Marco, my mother started. I said get out. He turned his back on me. Security will escort you. Take nothing but what you're wearing. And if you so much as whisper any of these insane accusations to the press, I will bury you in lawsuits until you graduate medical school as an old woman. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Men I'd known since childhood, who'd taught me to ride a bike and let me sneak cookies from the kitchen. They wouldn't meet my eyes as they walked me to the front door. I stumbled out into the snow wearing just my dress and heels, no coat, no phone, no wallet. Behind me, the party continued, Christmas music and laughter spilling out into the cold night air. I walked 4 blocks before I couldn't feel my feet anymore. Collapsed on a bench in Boston Common, shivering so hard my teeth chattered. That's when I remembered my grandfather's box. I'd grabbed it when I packed up my apartment last week, thrown it in my school bag without thinking. The bag was still in my car, parked 2 blocks from the estate. It took me 20 minutes to make it there, fumbling with frozen fingers to unlock the door. Inside the bag, beneath textbooks and stethoscopes, was the wooden box with my name on it. I opened it under the dome light. The black card, the note, the letter. Don't buy anything new. Redeem what we have lost. What did that mean? Redeem what? I turned the card over. A phone number was embossed on the back in small silver letters. My phone was dead. My father had cut that service too. But there was a payphone across the street, somehow still working in this digital age. I fed it quarters I found in my glove compartment and dialed. It rang 3 times. Then, First Continental Bank Emergency Services. How may I help you? I have a card, a black card. There's no name on it, just this number. A pause. May I have the card number, please? I read it off. Another longer pause. Then the voice changed, became warmer. Ms. Ashford, we've been waiting for your call. Please hold for Mr. Whitmore. Elliot Whitmore, my grandfather's friend. Lucia. His voice was gentle. I'm so sorry for what you must be going through. Can you come to the bank? Tonight? It's after midnight. I know. I'll be waiting. Elliot met me at a side entrance, took one look at my bare arms and borrowed coat from someone, helped me inside. He led me to his office. All dark wood and leather. The kind of room that smelled like old money and older secrets. Your grandfather asked me to help you when the time came, Elliot said, pouring hot tea into delicate china cups. I promised him I would. Tell me what happened. So I did. Everything. The hospital records, the confrontation, being thrown out. Elliot nodded slowly when I finished. Alfred knew this would happen. He knew Marco would eventually show his true colors, and that you'd have nowhere to turn. That's why he prepared for this. He opened a safe behind a painting and pulled out a thick folder. Your grandfather established a trust fund in your name. $60 million. I choked on my tea. 60 million? Yes, but there are specific conditions. He opened the folder, showing me pages of legal documents. The black card gives you a monthly allowance of $2,000 for living expenses. But to access the full amount, you must complete certain transactions. What kind of transactions? You must redeem family assets that have been lost, abandoned, or fallen into debt. Each time you successfully recover an asset, a proportional amount of the trust will be released to you. I stared at him. That's That's insane. Why would he do that? Elliot smiled sadly. Because Alfred knew you needed to take a journey. Not just to find assets, but to find the truth. He couldn't tell you directly. You wouldn't have believed him. Not about your own parents, but he could create a path for you to discover it yourself. He pulled out another sheet. Here's the first item on the list. Container number 7492 at Port of Boston. It's been accruing storage fees for 5 years. The fees now total $15,000. If you use the black card to pay those fees, you'll take ownership of whatever's inside, and $50,000 will be released from the trust to your personal account. What's in the container? I don't know. Alfred never told me. He just said it was where everything would begin. I looked at the card in my hand. Black and heavy, like it was made of something denser than plastic. If I do this, will I find out what really happened that night? The night Diego was arrested? Elliot's expression grew serious. Lucia, I don't know what your grandfather left for you to find, but I know this. Alfred Ashford was the most principled man I ever met. If he went to these lengths, it's because the truth matters more than you can imagine, and it's worth protecting, even 5 years later. I thought about Diego, dead in prison for a crime he swore he didn't commit. About Enzo, saved by a mysterious foundation. About my father's cold eyes as he threw me out into the snow. Do it, I said. Pay the storage fees. I want to see what's in that container. Elliot made a call. Even at 2 a.m, he had people who jumped when he spoke. Within an hour, the transaction was complete. The Port Authority opens at 8 a.m., he said. They're expecting you. Here's the documentation. He handed me an envelope, then paused. Lucia, your grandfather loved you very much. Whatever you find tomorrow, remember that. He did this because he believed you were strong enough to handle the truth. I left the bank as dawn was breaking over Boston Harbor. The black card felt warm in my pocket, like it was alive, like it had been waiting for me all along. The port was a maze of shipping containers stacked like giant metal Lego blocks. Red, blue, green, rust brown. Thousands of them, each holding someone's cargo, someone's secrets. The port manager, a weathered man named Sullivan, checked my paperwork with the careful attention of someone who'd learned not to trust appearances. Container 7492, he muttered. That one's been sealed a while. Storage fees lapsed 5 years ago, but there was a legal order preventing seizure or sale. Never seen anything like it. He looked up at me. You sure you want this? No telling what condition things are in after 5 years. I'm sure. He led me through the maze to a far corner, where older containers sat forgotten. Number 7492 was midnight blue, streaked with rust, salt-stained from ocean air. 2 workers with bolt cutters approached. The locks were thick, official-looking. Port Authority seals that hadn't been broken in half a decade. Stand back, Sullivan warned. The first lock snapped, then the second. The doors groaned as they swung open, hinges protesting. Sunlight flooded into darkness, and there, sitting in the shadows like a ghost, was a black Mercedes-Benz GLS. I stopped breathing. I knew this car. I knew it. That's a nice vehicle, Sullivan said appreciatively. Needs a good cleaning, but the model holds value. But I wasn't listening. I was walking forward slowly, like approaching a sleeping animal that might wake and devour me. The Mercedes was covered in dust, yes. The tires were flat. But I recognized the small dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into a light post during a driving lesson. The Harvard Medical School keychain still dangling from the rearview mirror. This was the car my parents had given me for my 19th birthday. The car I'd driven for 2 years before they told me they'd sold it out of state because the feng shui wasn't right. I'd loved this car. It had been my first real taste of independence. Why had my grandfather bought it? Why had he locked it away in a container? Ma'am? Sullivan's voice seemed to come from far away. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. My voice came out hoarse. Can I have a moment alone? He nodded slowly. Sure. We'll be in the office if you need anything. Just be careful. Interior might be moldy after all this time. They left. I heard their footsteps crunching away on gravel. I stood there for a long time just looking at it. Then slowly, carefully, I opened the driver's side door. The smell hit me first. Musty, damp. The scent of things left too long in darkness. The leather seats were cracked. Spiderwebs stretched across the steering wheel. But it was still my car. Still the place where I'd sung along to radio songs and practiced my medical terminology and dreamed about the future. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather crackled under me. I put my hands on the steering wheel, and suddenly, I was 19 again, driving to my first day of medical school, full of hope and certainty that I came from a good family. That girl seemed like a stranger now. I sat there as the morning sun climbed higher, trying to understand. Why this car? What was my grandfather trying to tell me? My keys were still in my school bag. I'd grabbed it from my car before coming here. Out of habit, I pulled them out, tried the ignition. Dead battery, of course. The car hadn't run in 5 years. I slumped back in the seat, frustrated. What was I supposed to find here? The keys slipped from my hand, fell into the gap between the seat and the center console. Damn it! I reached down into the narrow space, fingers searching. Touched something that wasn't keys. Something hard. Rectangular. Wedged deep beneath the seat. I pulled. It was stuck. I pulled harder, and whatever it was shifted, scraped against metal, and suddenly came free. I brought it up into the light. A Sony voice recorder. ICD-PX470. My voice recorder. The one I'd lost 5 years ago. I stared at it, heart hammering. The one I'd searched for everywhere. Torn my apartment apart looking for. Finally given up on and bought a replacement. It had been here. Under the driver's seat of this car. For 5 years. My hands shook as I pressed the power button. The screen flickered. Battery. 2%. One file. Recorded December 24th, 5 years ago. Duration, 4 hours, 37 minutes. I found my earbuds in my bag, plugged them in with trembling fingers, pressed play. At first, it was just noise. Road sounds. The hum of tires. Muffled voices in the front seat. My parents, talking about something I couldn't quite make out. I fast-forwarded. 10 minutes. 20. 30. Then at 43 minutes, everything changed. The sound of impact. Brutal, sudden. Metal hitting something soft. Screaming, my mother's voice high and terrified. I sat frozen, listening to my parents panic. Listening to them discuss what to do about the body in the street. Listening to my father say Diego's name. Fast forward again, hands shaking so badly I could barely control the device. 2 hours in. Garage door opening. Engine cutting off. Then voices, crystal clear now, right there in the car. It's done. Diego has signed the confession. My father's voice, calm, almost satisfied. But what if Lucia wakes up? What if she remembers? My mother, worried. She won't. You gave her enough sedatives to knock her out completely. And even if she suspects something, we'll tell her we're paying for the boy's surgery. Lucia is the most compassionate person we've ever met. That compassion is her weakness. She'll keep quiet because she'll think she's saving a life. You really think she'll believe it? I know she will. Our daughter's greatest virtue is her kindness. And kindness, Natalia, is the easiest thing in the world to weaponize. Laughter. My father was laughing. And you're not actually going to pay for the surgery, are you? Of course not. That's $500,000. Do you know how many campaign ads we can buy with that money? How many voters we can reach? Diego can die in prison. His son can die in a hospital bed. We'll be living in the governor's mansion. The battery died at 2 hours, 18 minutes. The earbuds fell from my ears. I sat in that dusty car, in that forgotten container, and I understood. My grandfather knew. Somehow, he'd discovered what my parents had done, and he'd preserved the evidence. He'd bought this car, locked it away where my father couldn't destroy it, and waited for the day I'd be ready to find it. And I understood something else too. For 5 years, I'd driven this car, the car that killed Maria Santos. I'd sat in this very seat, turned this very wheel, completely unaware that beneath me, under my feet, was a voice recording of my parents plotting murder and cover-up. They hadn't just committed a crime. They'd turned me into an unwitting accessory. They'd made me drive the murder weapon around Boston like it was a birthday present. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for Sullivan to come check on me. Long enough for the sun to climb to its peak and start its descent. When I finally emerged, I had the voice recorder clutched in my hand, and I knew exactly what I had to do. But first, I needed to make one more call. Enzo met me at a quiet cafe near MIT. When he saw my face, his expression darkened. What happened? I handed him my laptop. The voice recording was already loaded, file backed up in 3 different cloud services. Listen, I said simply. I watched his face as the recording played, watched anger flare, then harden into something colder. When my father's voice said, his son can die in a hospital bed, Enzo's hands clenched into fists. The recording ended. Silence stretched between us. They killed someone, Enzo said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. Let my father rot in prison for it, and tried to let me die too. My grandfather saved you, I said. The Evergreen Foundation, that was him. He couldn't stop them, but he could save you and preserve the evidence. Why didn't he go to the police? Because my father had too much power. Still does. If we take this to local police, it'll disappear into ongoing investigation and never see daylight. I leaned forward. But if we do this right, if we're smart about it, we can make sure everyone knows. The public, the press, the FBI. Enzo looked at me. You're talking about destroying your own family. They destroyed themselves, and your family, and a woman named Maria Santos, who no one even remembers because she was poor and probably undocumented and easy to forget. I felt tears on my face, brushed them away angrily. I'm talking about justice. How? I pulled out a folder Elliot had given me. Inside was an invitation. My father's campaign announcement gala, scheduled for February 15th at the Boston Harbor Hotel. 500 guests, every major media outlet in the state. We do it in front of everyone, where he can't hide, can't spin it, can't make it disappear. Enzo stared at the invitation, then at me. You're serious? My grandfather left me $60 million and a trail of breadcrumbs that led me to the truth. The least I can do is make sure that truth sees daylight. What do you need from me? Help me plan this, and when the time comes, stand with me. You're Diego's son. You have as much right to justice as anyone. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Partners? I took it. Partners. We ordered coffee and started planning. Outside, snow began to fall on Boston, just like it had 5 years ago. But this time, the snow wouldn't cover anything up. This time, the truth would finally come to light. We worked in secret, like conspirators in a thriller movie. Except this wasn't fiction. This was my life unraveling and reforming into something I barely recognized. Enzo found us a lawyer, Eleanor Ross. a woman with silver hair and a reputation for taking on cases no one else would touch. She'd made her name prosecuting corrupt politicians, and when we showed her the evidence, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is airtight," she said, listening to the recording for the third time. "Voice analysis will confirm it's them. The timeline matches the accident report, and if we can find any physical evidence in that car..." That's when we brought in Victor Kane, a retired police detective who now worked as a private investigator. He was 60, built like a barrel, with hands that had seen too many crime scenes. He spent 2 full days examining the Mercedes with a forensics kit that looked like something from a TV show. On the 3rd day, he called us. "Found something," he said, his voice gruff with excitement. "Deep in the undercarriage, where no one thought to look. Blood traces, dried, old, but viable for DNA testing." My stomach turned. Maria Santos's blood. Still there, after 5 years of my driving the car, after professional cleaning, after everything. Eleanor arranged for the sample to be tested at an independent lab. 2 weeks later, the results came back. DNA matched to Maria Santos, whose records were still on file from the original investigation. We had them. We had everything. But Eleanor warned us. "Your father has resources. The moment he suspects you're building a case, he'll bury it. Suppressed evidence, witnesses who suddenly can't remember, records that mysteriously disappear. We need to go public before he knows what's happening." That's when I told them about the gala. February 15th. 500 guests. Every media outlet in Massachusetts. He's announcing his run for governor. He'll be untouchable after that. Too high profile to prosecute without it looking political. Enzo frowned. "So we ambush him? Just show up and play the recording?" "Not just play it," I said slowly, an idea forming. "We bring the car." They all stared at me. "The Mercedes," I continued. "We bring it to the gala. Park it right outside the hotel. The physical evidence, right there where everyone can see it. Then we play the recording. Then Eleanor steps forward with the DNA results. And then..." I pulled out my phone, showed them the contact I'd been cultivating for weeks. Detective Sarah Chen from the FBI takes him into custody. Sarah Chen had been interested from the first call. Corruption cases involving politicians were her specialty. She'd been quietly reviewing everything we sent her, building her own parallel investigation. "It's risky," Eleanor said. "If anything goes wrong, if your father gets wind of this..." "Then we lose our only shot," I finished. "I know, but it's also the only way to guarantee he can't make this disappear." Victor grinned. "I like it. It's theatrical. And theater is exactly what you need for something this big." So we planned. Every detail. Every contingency. Who would speak when. Where the cameras needed to be. How to get a flatbed truck with the Mercedes through security. The answer to that last one came from an unexpected source. One of the hotel managers was a woman whose brother had been falsely convicted 15 years ago. When Eleanor explained what we were doing, she didn't hesitate. "I'll make sure your truck gets through. And I'll make sure the ballroom cameras are all functioning perfectly. No technical difficulties." The pieces were falling into place, but we should have known it wouldn't be that easy. I was staying at Enzo's apartment in Cambridge, a tiny 1-bedroom above a Chinese restaurant. My father's people were looking for me, and I needed to stay off the grid. We'd moved the Mercedes to a secure garage that Victor had access to, a place where evidence from old cases was stored. The recording was backed up on 7 different servers. Everything was ready. I should have been sleeping. Instead, I was reviewing Eleanor's presentation for the 100th time when I heard it. Glass breaking. Downstairs in the restaurant. Enzo was out getting food. I was alone. My phone was in my hand instantly, but before I could dial, the apartment door exploded inward. 3 men. ski masks. One had a crowbar, still dripping water from the fish tank he'd smashed downstairs. "The recording," the biggest one said. His voice was rough, local accent. "Give it to us and no one gets hurt." My father had found me. I backed toward the bedroom. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. The voice recorder, the laptop, all the copies. Hand them over." The laptop was on the couch, closed. The physical recorder was in my jacket pocket. Everything else was in the cloud, but they didn't know that. "It's not here," I lied. "It's with my lawyer." The big one laughed. "Your lawyer's office just got broken into too, sweetheart. Convenience, right? So unless you want things to get unpleasant, hand it over." Eleanor. God, was she okay? I must have shown something on my face, because he grinned. "Don't worry. We didn't hurt the old lady. Much. Now, last chance." I ran. Bedroom, bathroom, out the window onto the fire escape. I heard them crashing after me, cursing. The fire escape shook as I clambered down, my hands slipping on icy metal. I hit the alley and ran. Behind me, footsteps pounded. They were faster than me, but I knew these streets. I'd walked them for 5 years. I ducked through a gap between buildings, came out on Massachusetts Avenue, dove into a 24-hour diner. The place was nearly empty. A tired waitress looked up as I burst in, panting. "Bathroom," I gasped. "Where's the bathroom?" She pointed. I ran to it, locked myself in a stall, and called 911 with shaking fingers. "Someone broke into my apartment. 3 men. They're chasing me. I'm at the diner on Mass Avenue near—" "We have your location, ma'am. Units are on the way. Stay on the line." I stayed on the line, heard sirens approaching, heard shouting outside. Finally, a knock on the bathroom door. "Ma'am? Police. You can come out." A female officer, young, concerned. "You reported a break-in?" I told her everything. Well, most of everything. The men, the threats. Left out the part about evidence against my father. She took my statement. The men were gone, of course, but they'd left evidence of the break-in at Enzo's apartment. She said they'd investigate. When Enzo got back with the food, he found me sitting on his destroyed couch, surrounded by police officers. "What the hell happened?" I showed him the smashed door, the broken laptop. They'd taken it before I ran, but I pulled the voice recorder from my pocket. "They didn't get this, and everything's backed up. We're okay." But we weren't, really, because now my father knew we had evidence, which meant he'd be ready. The timeline was accelerating. Valentine's Day. How romantic. Eleanor's office had been ransacked, but she'd moved all the real evidence to a safe deposit box weeks ago. Still, it was a message. "We're watching. We can get to you." We met at an undisclosed location, Victor's sister's house in Quincy. Everyone was there. Eleanor, Victor, Enzo, me. And on speakerphone, Detective Sarah Chen. "I've got enough to make arrests," Sarah said. "But if you want this to stick, if you want to make sure it doesn't get buried in the system, you need to do it your way. Public. Undeniable. I'll have agents at the gala tomorrow. The moment you present the evidence, we'll move in." "What if he runs?" Enzo asked. "He won't. Your father has too much pride," Eleanor said, looking at me. "He'll think he can talk his way out of it. That's his mistake." I wasn't so sure. My father was proud, yes, but he was also a survivor. And survivors did desperate things when cornered. "We go forward," I said. "Tomorrow night, we end this." Victor cleared his throat. "I've arranged for a flatbed truck. The Mercedes will be cleaned up enough to look presentable, but not enough to destroy evidence. We'll have it outside the hotel entrance at exactly 7 p.m. That's when your father takes the stage. I've prepared remarks, Eleanor added. Lucia, you'll speak first. Tell your story. Then we play the recording. Then I present the DNA evidence. Then Detective Chen makes the arrest. Clean, simple, devastating. Nothing about this felt simple. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father's face when he threw me out into the snow, about my mother's hand cracking across my cheek, about Diego dying in prison, believing his sacrifice had saved his son when it had all been for nothing, about my grandfather dying alone, setting all of this in motion because he knew I'd be too weak to do it while he was alive. He'd been right, but I wasn't that weak anymore. The Boston Harbor Hotel blazed with light. Luxury cars lined the street. Women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos streamed toward the entrance. I watched from a coffee shop across the street, wearing a simple black dress I'd borrowed from a friend. Enzo sat beside me, also dressed up. Eleanor and Victor were already inside, positioned near the stage. My phone buzzed. Eleanor, your father just arrived. He's backstage. Security is tight, but our contact got us positioned. Ready? I typed back. Ready. Another text, this one from Sarah Chen. FBI in position. 5 agents inside, 3 outside. Green light from my end. The flatbed truck rounded the corner. On it, covered with a tarp, was the Mercedes. The driver, a guy Victor knew, parked it directly in front of the hotel entrance. Security tried to wave him away, but our contact inside had cleared it as delivery for the kitchen. The tarp stayed on, for now. Last chance to back out, Enzo said quietly. I looked at him. This man whose father had died in prison, whose childhood had been stolen, who should have died but was saved by a grandfather he never met. No backing out, I said. We crossed the street together. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet playing in the corner. 500 of Boston's most powerful people, all dressed in their finest, drinking champagne and pretending to care about democracy. I saw my mother first. She wore red, always red for important events. She was laughing at something a judge was saying, her hand on his arm, playing the part she'd perfected over decades. Then I saw my father. He stood near the stage, radiating confidence. He'd won. He'd silenced his troublesome daughter. He'd gotten away with murder. And now he was about to announce his run for the highest office in the state. The MC took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from a man who has served Massachusetts with distinction for over 20 years. I started moving toward the stage. Enzo followed. People turned to look at us, curious. Some recognized me. Whispered conversations rippled through the crowd. My mother saw me. Her face went white. Please welcome State Senator Marco Ashford. Applause thundered. My father climbed the stairs, waving, that perfect smile in place. He reached the microphone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tonight, I stand before you to announce. Excuse me. My voice cut through the applause. I was halfway to the stage now, people parting in confusion. My father's smile froze. Lucia? What are you? I need to interrupt you, Father. There's something everyone here needs to know. Security started toward me, but Eleanor stepped forward, showing her bar credentials. Let her speak. I'm her attorney, and this is a matter of public interest. The MC looked confused. My father's face darkened. Lucia, this is not the time. It's exactly the time. I reached the stage, climbed the stairs. Someone handed me a microphone. Our hotel contact, the manager with the wrongly convicted brother. 500 pairs of eyes on me. Cameras rolling. My father standing 3 feet away. Rage barely contained behind his politician's mask. My hands were shaking. I gripped the microphone harder. 5 years ago, on Christmas Eve, a woman named Maria Santos was killed in a hit-and-run accident on Beacon Street. A man named Diego Rivera confessed and went to prison. He died there last month, still maintaining his innocence to his son. Murmurs through this crowd. My mother was pushing through people, trying to reach the stage. Diego Rivera didn't kill Maria Santos. The person who did is standing right here. I turned to face my father. His face was stone. On that Christmas Eve 5 years ago, my parents gave me drugged champagne so they could discuss illegal campaign activities on the drive home. While I was unconscious in the back seat, my father, drunk, struck and killed Maria Santos. Then they forced Diego Rivera to take the blame by promising to pay for his son's medical treatment, a promise they never kept. The room exploded, shouting, cameras surging forward. My father grabbed my arm. "You're having a breakdown. Everyone, my daughter is not well." I pulled out the voice recorder. This was in the car that night. It recorded everything. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the ballroom. "Lucia is the most compassionate person we've ever met. That compassion is her weakness." Silence. Absolute silence. The recording continued. My father's plan. My mother's complicity. Their laughter about letting Diego and Enzo die. When it finished, no one moved. Eleanor took the stage. "I have DNA evidence linking the Ashford family Mercedes to Maria Santos's blood. I have financial records proving no money was ever paid to the Rivera family. And I have witness testimony from the mechanics who were paid to cover up the damage." My father's face was gray. This is fabricated, edited. Anyone can... "Dad." He stopped, looked at me. "The car is outside. Right now. The actual car. With Maria's blood still on it. The car you gave me as a birthday present. The car you made me drive for 2 years, knowing what it had done." His mouth opened. Closed. For the first time in my life, I saw my father speechless. Victor's voice came through the sound system. "If everyone could please look at the front entrance." On the screen set up around the ballroom, security camera feeds showed the flatbed truck. Someone pulled the tarp away. There sat the Mercedes. Dusty, damaged, unmistakable. My mother screamed. Just a short, sharp sound before she clapped her hand over her mouth. Marco Ashford. Detective Sarah Chen walked through the crowd, her badge held high. 5 other agents followed. "You're under arrest for manslaughter, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and bribery of public officials. You have the right to remain silent." My father didn't move as they handcuffed him. He just stared at me. "You destroyed your own family," he said quietly. "For what? A gardener and a dead immigrant? They were nobody." "They were people," I said. "And unlike you, I actually have a conscience." They led him away. My mother tried to follow, but more agents stopped her. "Natalia Ashford, you're also under arrest." I watched them disappear through the crowd, watched 500 powerful people stand frozen, not knowing what to do. Watched my entire world collapse and reform in the space of 10 minutes. Enzo found me backstage 20 minutes later. I was sitting on a couch in a dressing room, shaking. "Hey," he said softly. "You did it. I destroyed my family. You got justice for mine." I looked up at him. "Your father, Maria Santos, they deserved better than this. They got the truth. Sometimes that's all we can give the dead." Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "The FBI wants statements from both of you. The DA is already talking about trial dates. And Lucia..." She paused. "Your father's attorney just called. He wants to make a deal." "No deals," I said immediately. "That's what I told him." She smiled. You're stronger than your grandfather thought. He'd be proud. Would he? I wasn't sure. I felt hollow, empty, like I'd won a battle but lost something I couldn't name. 3 weeks later. The trial would take months to unfold, but the evidence was overwhelming. My father's lawyers tried everything. Claims of mental illness on my part, suggestions that the recording was fabricated, arguments about chain of custody. None of it worked. The DNA didn't lie. The recording was authenticated by 3 independent experts. The mechanics from the body shop, facing their own charges, testified about the cover-up. On March 12th, my father pled guilty to avoid a trial that would have been even more humiliating. 25 years. My mother got 15 for obstruction and accessory after the fact. I didn't attend the sentencing. I couldn't. Instead, I was at First Continental Bank, meeting with Elliot one last time. The trust is fully released, he said, sliding papers across his desk. $60 million. Your grandfather's final gift. I stared at the numbers. All that money. All that power. There's one more thing, Elliot said. He pulled out a final envelope. Alfred asked me to give you this after everything was resolved. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. My dearest Lucia, if you're reading this, you've found the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you directly. You wouldn't have believed me. Not about your own parents. I needed you to discover it yourself, to become strong enough to face it. The money is yours, but I hope you'll use it wisely. Not for yourself, but for others like Diego and Enzo. For people who have no voice, no power, no chance. You have a gift, Lucia, not the money. That's just paper. Your real gift is that you care, deeply, painfully. Your parents tried to use that against you, but it's actually your greatest strength. Don't let this break you. Let it remake you. All my love, grandfather. I folded the letter carefully, looked at Elliot through tears. He was right, I said. About everything. He usually was. 2 months later, I stood in front of a crowd of reporters, Enzo beside me, Eleanor behind us. We were in a community center in Roxbury, one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods. Today we're announcing the formation of the Alfred Ashford Foundation, I said, reading from prepared remarks that didn't feel prepared at all. They felt true. This foundation will focus on 3 things: providing free legal representation for those wrongly convicted, funding medical care for uninsured families, and supporting immigrant communities. I looked directly at the cameras. My family built its wealth on lies and exploitation. I can't change that, but I can make sure that wealth is used to help people, not harm them. Enzo spoke next. My father died in prison for a crime he didn't commit, but before he died, he asked me to find the truth. This foundation is part of that truth. It's proof that even when powerful people do terrible things, justice can still prevail. Questions from reporters. I answered what I could, deflected what I couldn't. Afterward, Enzo and I walked through Boston Common. Snow was melting. Spring was coming. What will you do now? He asked. Finish medical school. Try to actually help people instead of just talking about it. I paused. What about you? I'm enrolling at community college, night classes. I want to study law. Help other people like my dad. We reached the bench where I'd sat 5 years ago, thrown out into the snow, clutching my grandfather's box. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. Do you think it was worth it? Enzo asked quietly. Everything we went through? I thought about my father in prison, my mother broken, my family name destroyed, the nightmares I still had, the therapy I'd started. But I also thought about Diego's name cleared, Maria Santos's family finally having answers, Enzo getting a chance at a real future. The foundation that would help hundreds of people who had no one else. Yeah, I said. It was worth it. He smiled. Your grandfather chose well. He did, I agreed. He knew I'd need time to become the person who could do this. That's why he left me the breadcrumbs instead of just telling me. He was making me stronger. Are you stronger? I considered that. Was I? I'd lost my family, my trust in people, my innocence, but I'd gained something too. Purpose, truth, the knowledge that I could stand up to power and win. I'm different, I said finally. Maybe that's the same thing. We sat in silence as the sun set over Boston. Somewhere in the city, my parents were beginning their prison sentences. Somewhere else, families were being helped by the foundation we'd built from the ashes of my family's crimes. And in my pocket, the black card my grandfather had left me felt warm. Not with power or money, but with purpose. Don't buy anything new, he'd written. Redeem what we have lost. I'd redeemed more than property. I'd redeemed truth itself. And that, I was learning, was the only inheritance that really mattered. 1 year later, I graduated from Harvard Medical School in May. My parents weren't there. They were in prison. But Enzo was there. Eleanor and Victor. Elliot Whitmore. And somehow, in the empty seat beside Enzo, I felt my grandfather's presence. The foundation was thriving. We'd helped 12 families fight wrongful convictions. We'd paid for surgeries for 43 uninsured patients. We'd provided legal aid to over 100 immigrants facing deportation. I started my residency at Boston Medical Center, specializing in emergency medicine. Every day, I helped people who had no power, no voice, no options. Every day, I thought about Diego Rivera, about Maria Santos, about second chances and truth in the long road to justice. And every night, before I fell asleep, I pulled out my grandfather's letter and read the last line. Let it remake you. It had. I was remade, not into someone harder or colder, despite everything I'd been through, but into someone who understood that compassion and strength weren't opposites. They were the same thing, just viewed from different angles. My grandfather had known that. He'd known that the girl who would drink drugged champagne to please her parents was the same girl who would fight for justice even when it cost her everything. He'd bet $60 million on that truth. And in the end, he'd been right. The silent legacy he'd left me wasn't the money or the evidence or even the truth. It was the belief that I was strong enough to handle all of it. And I was. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. It wasn't an easy story to tell, and I know it wasn't an easy story to hear. But sometimes the hardest stories are the ones that matter most. If this reached you, if it moved you, if it made you think about truth and justice and the courage it takes to stand up to the people who are supposed to love you, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Let it travel to the corners of the world my grandfather never saw, because the truth should never be silent, and neither should we.